That you actually moved to the area for 6 months, is that right?
Yeah, for 6 months. Moved to Hoyk, had a wee flat in the high street, really close to Alchemy's office, which was ace, which meant I could kind of just walk the town and get to know people, and then have the support of Alchemy being really close by as well.
And how soon did you get into making the film? Did you spend a little bit of time getting to know the area and the people and then have a plan, or did you just go, I'm going to get straight into filming?
Well, that was my intention, but I kind of convinced myself I wasn't making the film. I was just kind of wandering the town, chatting to folk with the camera, and then I soon realised that actually, and so there was no pressure then because I wasn't making the film. And a couple of weeks in, I realised that I probably was making the film.
And Rachel, how, in terms of like other people obviously here who are either going to have or are going to commission filmmakers, or what happened today and want to, like, what would your advice be for supporting filmmakers, or how best to help that practice happen in community arts?
That's a really good question. And I think the obvious answer that often gets overlooked is to listen to what they need and how they work. So supporting how they normally work, but maybe identifying what they actually might want to push with the support that an opportunity like Culture Collective presented. Like, what actually don't they do, or what have they never done? Which I think is what we did well. We already liked your work, and we knew what you would do. We knew we wanted some kind of portrait of Hoyk and its people, with Hoyk and its people as the first of the residencies. But I don't think we could anticipate or hope for how much it was collaborative, and the relationships that are still there today, that actually a lot of the conversation today, and I imagine yesterday, has been bringing to my mind is, what do we do now with those relationships? We can tour a film. The film is beautiful. It's still beautiful. It's the third time we've seen it in the cinema. But there's more legacy that is unseen in this room as well.
And for the Hoyk residents, like, was this their first interaction? Because obviously Alchemy existed before. It was a film festival first, and it's now moved into. Did you find before you had Culture Collective that it was almost like two separate things, and has this brought kind of Hoyk residents more into the frame of when the film festival comes, or was there a connection before that happened?
I would say it's not brand new, but Alchemy's been going for, I think, about 12 years, and for the past 3 or 4, it's been on a more community-engaged trajectory. This was the first long-term residency, and I think it was a perfect one to start with, and it culminated in the world premiere of the film was actually in Hoyk at the festival, and I think that's a good example of the effect and impact. Normally our festival is the sort of one part of our programme that is for sort of incomers and people travelling to Hoyk, but the audience that night, there was visiting filmmakers complaining that they couldn't get a seat in the cinema, and it was at least 50% Hoyk audience who dominated the Q&A and didn't leave any room for the artist questions. And it was nothing I've really experienced before. So I think it's the start of actually a change. And I think Mark's a big part of that. And I think every time he comes back, that's evident as well.
And Mark, how was it? Obviously, when we talk about filmmaking, we spoke about it before, like, it is often quite a collaborative thing, and the idea that one person makes a film isn't the usual practice. You would have a cinematographer, a director, sound. How did you find that coming in, having worked in maybe what people might see as a more traditional sense, to having to adjust to being essentially a lone team to make that film?
Well, I've never worked kind of conventional way. I've always been a lone filmmaker, which I kind of was to an extent with this, but with a team behind me, just up the road. That was the difference with this, whereas I would have to do absolutely everything myself normally without any support. Or with very little support because budget wouldn't allow for it. But with this, as I was saying to you earlier, if you have a couple of people in the room, that changes the dynamic when you're interacting with people. So I find that it's much more intimate, and I feel like everybody gets more out of it if there's time, because that's the thing that you don't see, is the relationships that have been developed. It's the unseen labour of these films, so it's all the time that you're hanging out with folk and getting to know them that leads to this. Sometimes it's quite quick and relationships are made quite quickly. It just depends on the folk. But things like the Saxhorn band, that was kind of after, like, quite an involved process of kind of getting to know them and kind of arranging So it's that. It's all the kind of. It's kind of things that seem spontaneous, like sometimes might not necessarily be, but I think that's the trick, to try and still have that freshness and feel, but for it to appear like I just happened to be in the woods when a brass band walked past, you know. I wish it was, but yeah, that's a difference. It was still me on the ground the majority of the time, apart from the larger shoots, but I had a team behind me just kind of 5 minutes up the road that were organising lots of the things I would also. They were acting as what they were producers. So that was kind of the difference. And that's what the project's allowed to happen.
How much going into it, like, did you have a sense of narrative? Did you think before you started, I kind of think I want to tell this story, or is it you talk to people, or did you always accept I'm going to have to just have no narrative and what happens, or did you think, you know, I need to have some sort of thread? Was there a theme, or was there?
No, not at all. I mean, I've made enough of these type of films now that I kind of trust the process, so that I'm comfortable enough to film and just keep filming and getting to know people, and then panic like hell when it comes to the edit and going like, what is this, you know? But it starts to emerge quite quickly. Like initially we didn't know if it was going to be a series of films or an installation. There was no, like Alchemy weren't prescriptive in that sense, but quite quickly I think that we thought that feature film was the way to go. It just seemed to be kind of working towards that. But I tend not to have. I think going into these things, if I have a preconceived notion, it tends to be dashed almost immediately, and those kind of like, you know, bullshit ideas I had thankfully go right out the window, and I realise that that's just not what's going to happen, you know.
And what's next for Alchemy? What's the next project, you know? Or?
Well, we're grateful that the project's been extended. We're now on to, so Mark was our first resident. We're just finishing our third artist in residence and about to welcome the fourth. So continuing with the residencies, which has been successful in so many ways. We also run a project called Film Town, which is more about getting people in the community to make films, to train them in the skills of filmmaking and film curation. So lots of community engagement, and still going with the annual film festival as well. So hopefully we'll see some of you there.
I think one of the problems with projects sometimes is that when the artist leaves, then that's done. But I think this time working with Alchemy, you know, the people that I've made connections with are now kind of in Alchemy's orbit, and the work's kind of continuing. So it's not like, because that's always the question, what happens when I leave? So I develop these intense relationships with people and then I go. So what happens then? You know,
have you been back to Hoyt?
I have, yeah, absolutely. And you know, I still see people in the street and say hello, and I'm hoping to go back and make another film. It's kind of like a sort of, you know. It's
maybe important to say as well that you also made a couple of films for some of the groups in the film, and that most people in the film, if they roles that ventured into acting or performance, everyone was paid. So I think in terms of the production role, while you were out filming and forming relationships, as long as Alchemy was, you know, keeping robust safeguarding policies, making sure everyone's treated fairly, I think we had a very good equilibrium.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing I've never had the opportunity to do before, is to, as you're saying, so the shot who were performing a cover of Robert Wyatt's Sea Song, we were able to commission that, you know, and kind of these young musicians in town did this amazing thing. So I've never had the opportunity to be able to commission work before within the larger piece. So that was incredible.
Amazing. I suppose we should maybe allow people to ask some questions if you have any. So does it, I don't know, maybe I've broken the rules here, I don't know. Marv?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
How was that?
It was okay. I'd been a couple of times, sort of with the intention that maybe I could convince Ying to let me come in and film. So like maybe some of the budget went towards.
You'll see it on the expenses.
But yeah, that was. I didn't think I could ask anybody else. I felt like something that I would need to do. So that's one of the things I didn't film, just because I was otherwise engaged. Yeah, but I highly recommend it.
Nice. Any other questions?
Yeah, the bulk of the things actually were by chance, and the things that seem too good to be true probably are. But the bulk of the shots, obviously the bridge. There's things like the bridge being hauled into place that we knew was happening, so I was able to go and scout the location first of all and find the shot and then go back. So that there was things like that. But I shoot digitally, which I love, and it means I can let the camera run a lot longer than if you were shooting film. So I'm able just to become part of the furniture almost. The difference with shooting films normally and in Hoik is if you turn a camera on, you'll turn around and there'll be 3 people standing behind you looking through the viewfinder. So it's kind of telling me what to do, telling me the shot that I should get, asking why I'm filming that, particularly with at the Tour of Britain when the bikes go past. A guy came up and he was telling me how rubbish the shot was, that I should go down there for a better shot. Yeah. And that happens quite a lot. But that immediately, that's engagement to me. So like that immediately means you have that conversation and you start chatting to people, then you get to know them. And, then I might be able to film with them later, or they'll recommend somebody else. And it kind of snowballed really, really quickly. Doesn't happen everywhere, but like Hoik, like folk aren't shy and coming up to you and going, what are you up to?
How did you go about picking or meeting the people that you did end up filming? Was it total chance, or was there like a bit of guidance of, this is some interesting people to speak to?
With Alchemy being embedded in the community, I was introduced to some folk. They might not necessarily have ended up in the film, but they might have suggested somebody else. So I think it's probably maybe 50-50 of kind of chance meetings, and then kind of...
I think often a conversation like, I've heard there's a Scrabble club, and then like quite many months of trying to find out where this exists, because it's just that we've seen someone that we know on the street with a Scrabble board, but it's all secret.
Yeah.
So really working a relationship out as well.
That was kind of, most of the budget actually went to the investigation about like who and where the Scrabble club actually did the thing. But it's the kind of thing, so it's that they don't have you're either in the Scrabble club or you're not. They have no need to advertise, so they don't have a Facebook page. It's not advertised anywhere, so it's really hard to remember where this happens. When we finally found out like who they were and where they were, and then they finally let us film, they were quite bemused. Like some folk, and rightly so.
There's almost a documentary in that in itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Any last questions from anyone?
I had a kind of blanket permission from the Hoik flood protection group. I met somebody really early on, just because I was out with a camera, and it's quite a big camera, and folk, just like we were saying, folk come up to me. So I kind of had permission in that sense. The wider shots like that, I tend to just film. I think if there's enough distance, then that's kind of, ethically, I think that's fine. Anybody who's right in shot, I had permission, and what the form's called? Participation form. So it's kind of just like, it's just finding that kind of balance. But the workers were just, the flood protection works go on Hoik, and they're just everywhere at the moment, kind of working there. So. Yeah, because I'm with things like that, they're really used to, they have their own resident filmmaker and photographer, so, which I wasn't, obviously, but I'm one of a number of people there with cameras in that kind of instance, so sometimes that works. I'm really keen, like, I never hide my presence. In fact, I go out of my way to make, I'm filming, because I don't want, I don't want to film people when they're unaware, if I can help it at all. It's an ongoing learning process though about the ethics of this kind of thing, and learning all the time. I think working on this project and having the budget allowed it to be even more ethical, if that makes sense, because lots of the things were pre-arranged, and I'm way less reticent to chase after somebody with a participation form now, whereas years ago I might have been a bit more like, oh my God, but you have to,
And maybe just to round up there, what was the absolute highlight of your time in the film, or your time in residence?
Oh, I don't know. I think at the premiere, as Rachel was talking about, it was a home crowd and spirits were really, really high. I mean, the moment that the second shot came on and I said good morning to somebody, like the place just erupted, like it was the funniest thing ever. And then when we got to the shot with the dog, it was like I was Jacques Tati or something. It was just like people were completely in like floods of tears. It was brilliant.
I think it felt like their film.
I think that's, yeah.
Claimed it in
absolutely.
a way. We had a red carpet and the saxophone band played live that night.
So I think that's probably the highlight. The saxophone band played at the premiere, and it was just a flood of tears. Like it was so emotional. It was
that's the thing, isn't it? When the projects work, it feels like the community is, and then the community grows, and I think that's the beauty of what happened here. So thank you so much, Mark and Rachel.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
And we'll hand over to Morvern, Kathryn to say our final goodbyes.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Matt, for an excellent Q&A. I was just going to say a couple of words, and so was Kathryn, to close. Something I didn't say earlier, actually, today. There was just something I wanted to mention around a kind of philosophy or way of thinking that I'm kind of encouraging at the moment, which is called How We Would Like It to Be, which for me is kind of identifying a better way of doing things and then trying to get there. So far for the events over the last couple of days, these have included holding events in locations most folk across Scotland are able to reach in a few hours, some easier than others, including Shetland. Who knew there was a direct Shetland to Dundee flight? Just holding events slightly later so that people can travel to the event on the day and don't have to come the night before. Paying people to attend if they're out of contract. Paying people to present their work. Paying for additional access needs, including childcare. Captioning all the films in the programme, and having live BSL interpretation and captioners where possible. We have our lovely interpreters here, and we will get a video of this captioned and uploaded to the YouTube channel. So it's not perfect, but we're trying, and hopefully we're getting closer to how we would like it to be. So thank you very much for your attendance. I'm just going to pass on to Kathryn to remind you about postcards.
Yeah, and so to finish, so that we can get out for the DCA's film programme this evening. We're on it.
Thank you so much, DCA. You've been amazing.
DCA have been amazing. A massive part of making this happen. So I asked you at the beginning of today to just muse on those questions for your postcards, and I am now reminding you to fill them in. I have more and I have pens. So what are you taking from today? If you remember one thing, what would you like that one thing to be? And a complete the sentence task. Arts and artists matter in communities because. I'd really love to hear what you're taking away from today. There's a post box at the back. Anna, if you can just point at the post box right next to that. Thank you very much.
Honest, box out and ourselves and fill these out.
I'll brandish it. There's more here. But so as not to finish on a administrative task, thank you for being with us. It really genuinely is a team effort, a community effort. So many people have contributed to today, not least Morv for pulling the whole thing off. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for all of the amazing, amazing work that you do and you support and you champion and you make happen. We are doing it together. Let's keep doing it. Have very safe journeys home. Thank you so much.
Give me a wave. Give me a wave. Woo! Wah! Wah! Wah!
Let's go.
Right, let's get the hell out of the cinema.